All right, so today we're going to talk about one way to become a good writer. As we learned previously, the writing process is a process and there's many steps in it. So we're going to kind of lump the first couple steps in that process together and talk about that. So one way to become a good writer is to consider this. Even very experienced good writers, think about J.K. Rowling, who wrote Harry Potter. Okay, think about Stephen King, who writes tons and tons of novels. I can't even imagine how many he's written. Even those writers struggle to come up with ideas and to get started. So know that from the very beginning. Even very professional writers, people that write all the time for a living, struggle with this part. Getting started is the hardest part. So what makes them good writers then? Well, many things make a good writer, I should say. They're probably good readers for one. But another thing is for sure, instead of just freezing up or giving up, they explore many, many ideas. They think about what makes a good story when they select one of their many ideas, and they plan out what they're going to write before they write it. So you might have the misconception that you're supposed to just sit down and start pumping out a draft. That's not how it works generally, okay, with some exceptions. Some people's process might look that way, and we can talk about that. But for most people, thinking about lots of different ideas, thinking about what makes a good story, and using that to inform which idea you're going to pick and go with, and then writing out a plan before you actually start writing out a draft is the way to go. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So this learning target, by the end of this playlist, your goal is to be able to say, I can thoughtfully brainstorm and plan for a writing composition. Composition just means a piece of writing, and you're going to see that word a lot. So it's good to know what that means. As always, remember, you can use and reuse all of the resources in this playlist to help you master this target. So you might need to watch certain videos more than once. You might have to go to a certain website and read its content more than once. That's okay. So don't be afraid of repeating steps. It's not going to hurt you whatsoever. It's only going to help you. So let's talk about how to make the grade here. Here's your proficiency scale for this target. As it says up here, this is what you're trying to say, that you can thoughtfully brainstorm and plan a composition. So to get a 1, which would be in the 20% range, that means that you cannot brainstorm ideas, select one, and plan a composition even with my help. Okay? To get a 2, which would be in the 40% range, perhaps you can generate or recognize some good ideas, but you have trouble choosing the best idea and then planning without my assistance. To get a 3, which would be in the 60% range, this is where you're starting to pass, you can generate multiple viable, which means ideas that could work, multiple viable ideas for a composition, and self-select your best idea, and can effectively plan for that composition all without my help. That's where you're trying to get, okay? To get a 4, which is getting you up to a B, not only can you brainstorm, select, and plan ideas for a composition, but you can effectively explain how to do that process and your reasoning behind your decisions. So you can say, this is my process. I had this idea, I got this idea here, I talked to this person, I got this idea, then I thought about it, and this is the best idea, and this is why. You can tell me why this was your best idea, and then you can show me how you planned for your composition and explain to me why you did that. Okay, if you want to get to the very top level, which is 5, okay, this is a high A range, not only can you brainstorm, select, and plan ideas for a composition, but you are going to do that for a composition that is meant for submission to the Scholastic Writing Competition. And this is a live link, so you can click on this and it will take you to this website that will tell you what this writing competition is. Okay, so there's lots of information on this website, and I'll let you explore that on your own. You must select a writing category from the approved list. So this link takes you to the approved list of types of writing you can submit. And also, you need to be able to cite one mentor text, at least one mentor text, that will help shape your composition. A mentor text means a piece of professional writing that already exists, okay, that you're going to use to kind of help guide the way that you write, okay? So it's like finding a good example and telling you why that's a good example and how you're going to use that as inspiration for your piece of writing. So that's how you get to the very, very top, okay? And of course, I'll guide you along the way. All right, so if you are preparing to write a composition, here are kind of like the 5 steps, okay, for preparing to write the composition. This is before you even start writing it. Number 1, look up and ask for or think of many different ideas, okay? Number 2, study what makes a good piece of writing. This depends on the type of composition you're going to write. And for us, we're going to start with a personal narrative, which is a story about yourself. So that's always a good place to start with writing because you know yourself and you're pulling ideas out of your own head. So that should be helpful to you. Number 3, based on what makes a good piece of writing, select your best idea. Okay, and it's hard because you might have lots of good ideas, but you have to be able to select what is the best idea and understand why it's the best idea. Number 4, you need to plan the structure of your composition. So roughly, what is this going to look like? If you've heard the term outline, okay, that's something we're going to talk about. And number 5, if you start to plan and it's not working out, try a different idea. Okay, there's no harm in this, and writers do it all the time. Okay, sometimes you have to try things out and they don't work, and that's okay. That's part of the learning process, and that's part of being able to understand and recognize what is a good idea versus a bad idea, and that's a very important skill. All right, so let's look at these a little bit closer, and this is just a brief overview. So everything I'm about to talk about, there will be something further down in the playlist that's going to explain it in much greater detail. This is just an overview. Okay, so number 1, look up, ask for, and think of many different ideas. How can you do that? 1, hunt the internet. You all know how to look things up on the internet. You know this guy right here, Google. So you can literally search writing ideas. You might want to spell it correctly. Writing ideas, we could say for narratives if you want, because that's the type of essay that you're going to write. And you can't see it here, but it says that there are over 5 billion results here. So there's lots of ways to look that up online. Okay. So number 1 is hunt the internet. 2, ask your classmates, friends, parents, coaches. Okay. Ask people for ideas. Okay. Writing, a lot of people think about writing as a very secluded, isolated thing to do where you're on your own, but it can be a very social experience. Okay, I get my best writing ideas by talking to other people. I talked to my husband when I was in college, especially when I had to write big essays and papers. Talking things out with him really helped me a lot. But you can talk to your classmates here in class, you can talk to your friends outside of class, talk to your parents or guardians, grandparents, anybody in your family, siblings, or your coaches who you spend a lot of time with, perhaps. Okay? Another idea is to just reflect on what you know and what you find interesting. It's best to write about what you know. That's a term you maybe have heard. And also what you think is interesting. If you're not interested in your own story, or if you don't know much about what you're trying to write, it's not going to turn out very well, is it? Other people won't find it interesting if the writer themselves didn't have their heart in it. So that's very important to keep in mind. Another idea is to think about stories that you enjoy reading. Okay, what about that story is enjoyable to you, and how can you use that to inspire your own writing? This is back to the term mentor text that I talked about before when I was on this proficiency scale. And to get to the top, you do need to be able to identify a mentor text that you are going to use for inspiration. So be keeping that in mind throughout. Okay, number 2, study what makes a good piece of writing. So again, in the playlist, we're going to go over this in much greater detail. One thing to think about is conflict, okay? The drama, mama. Okay, drama is what makes any story interesting. Okay, if you are telling a story, fictional or real, something that happened to you or something you're making up, every good story that you've ever enjoyed has a conflict. And there's always a main conflict, and then there's little conflicts that kind of lead up to and come after that conflict. So you need to be thinking about that. What is the big piece of conflict in this story? What are the other story elements? Inciting incident, climax, which means the most exciting part, and the other parts. Okay, and again, I'm going to talk about those in detail later on in this playlist. Theme or lesson. Okay, a lot of times, especially personal narratives, will have some sort of life lesson. Okay, what did you learn in this story about yourself that you are trying to teach other people through your story? So be thinking about that. If you can't figure out anything like that that goes along with your story, then it's probably not going to be the most interesting or best story to select for a personal narrative. And then think about the characters and the setting, which is where it takes place, descriptions, okay? You need to have good descriptions of these characters, and if you're writing a story about yourself, then you, of course, are a character. So how are you going to describe yourself in your story? Anybody else that's involved in the story? Where did the story take place? Was it at a school? Was it at your house, in your neighborhood, running around with the kids? So keep things like that in mind too. How is that going to add to what is interesting about your story? Okay, based on what makes a good piece of writing, all of those elements I just talked about, select your best idea. Okay, so let's take a look at a quick example. Say these were my ideas. My 3 ideas were my 5th birthday party, okay, when I lost and found my dog, and when I scored a winning goal at a soccer game. So those are my 3 ideas I'm trying to pick from. So perhaps I go, my 5th birthday party. Everybody tells me that at my 5th birthday party, I did this funny thing where I tried to blow out the candle and I couldn't blow it out and I got really frustrated. Okay, so maybe there's that. But then I start thinking about it and I'm like, well, but then it's going to be hard for me to come up with really good descriptions because I don't remember it very well. It's just stuff that other people have told me, okay? And there's not really a lesson to be learned there. It's just kind of a funny little anecdote, which is just like a brief little story, not a fully developed story. So maybe I'm going to cross this one out, okay? When I lost and found my dog. Okay, this might be a good contestant. It was very emotional, okay? So there's definitely, obviously, a conflict there. The conflict was me trying to find my dog, and it was very emotional, okay? And then, of course, there's definitely a climax where I found my dog. That was the exciting part of the story, and I could tell that, okay? Maybe I learned a lesson about how I need to take very good care to close the gate and make sure I'm taking care of my dog, and that's something that I learned, okay? So that could be a good contender. How about when I scored a winning goal at a soccer game? Okay, so I talked to my coach and he came up with this idea and he said maybe you should write about that game where it was neck and neck and you won the game at the last minute. Okay, so I've already eliminated this one. Then I have these 2, and these 2 both could be pretty good. So which one is the winner? Which one am I going to end up writing about? Well, I might just have to think about, first of all, like the most exciting part of the story in both of them. Which one was more exciting, and would I more like to read about myself? And that's always a good idea, is to put yourself in your reader's shoes, okay? So ultimately, I'm not sure which one I'm going to pick right now, but I'll probably pick one of those 2 and not this 5th birthday party. Okay? So the next step is to plan the structure of your composition. There's lots of ways to plan the structure. An outline, you may have written a formal outline for an essay in middle school, or perhaps not, okay? So I'm going to show you in the playlist that that's one way to plan it. A bubble map you may have heard of. It's a little bit different way to do it. Planning things along a plot pyramid is a really good idea because it can ensure that you are including all of these story elements, and those are pretty important to making a good, compelling story that somebody would want to read. So these are just 3 ideas, and there might even be more that I'm going to introduce you to later on in the playlist. But the next step after you've selected an idea is to kind of plan the structure. All right. And next, if the plan isn't working, try out a different idea. It is okay to start over. It does not mean that you've done something wrong or anything like that. It's not a waste of your time. What is a waste of your time is to try to move forward with something that your heart just isn't in and that you know is not going to work out. That is the waste of time. It's not a waste of time to admit that it's not working out and to start over. Okay, so please keep that in mind. I heard this great saying the other day when I was watching a show. It was, failure is not the opposite of success, it's part of it. Okay, so sometimes failing is part of a greater success, so keep that in mind. Okay, keep in mind also that I'm going to give you the time that you need. You have time to revise. That's built into this process. And you want to wind up with something you are very proud of. So like I said before, it is a waste of time to try to force something to happen that's not going to happen. Okay? So make sure that you are proud of yourself every step of the way. And if you ever don't feel that way and it's just not working out, sometimes tweaking something can make something work. And we'll talk about that later on. But if it's just not working, please try out a different idea. So perhaps initially I said, I'm going to go with When I Lost and Found My Dog. And then I start planning it out and it just isn't sounding like it's going to be that interesting of a story. Well, I've got this runner up here, so I'm just going to switch ideas here. All right, so that's a very brief overview of what you're going to do to prepare to write a composition, a little preview of what we're going to explore in this playlist, and how we're going to get you to the top of this learning target.